Welcome to Learning English Every Day. Today, we enter a silent city at 3 a.m. to find a light that saves a lonely heart. My name is David. I am an architect. But I do not build houses of stone. I do not build towers of steel. I build stories of ink. I build stories of paper. I build stories of shadows. I live in a small apartment. It is on the 5th floor. The building is old. The bricks are red. My room has a specific smell. It smells of cold tea. It smells of old books. It smells of dust. Most people like the sun. They like the bright day. They like the noise. But I am different. For most people, the night is a time to disappear. It is a time to close the eyes. It is a time to hide under a blanket. But for me, the night is honest. The night is real. I suffer from chronic insomnia. My mind refuses to sleep. When the sun goes down, my brain wakes up. My brain is like a hungry animal. I sit at my wooden desk. I face the large window. The glass is cold. Outside, the city is a desert. It is a desert of concrete. The streets are black. The asphalt is frozen. The streetlights are like soldiers. They are tall. They are lonely. They stand in the gray mist. In the daytime, I am a ghost. I walk through the crowds. No one sees me. No one talks to me. But at 3:00 a.m. I am a king. I am the king of a quiet kingdom. The silence is not empty. The silence is a weight. It is a velvet weight. It presses against my skin. In this silence I can hear everything. I can hear my own breath. I can hear the beating of my heart. Thump, thump, thump. I look across the street. There is another building. It is called the Willow Court. It is a gray giant. It has hundreds of windows. They are all identical. In the daylight, the building is messy. There is laundry hanging. There is dirty glass. There is the noise of televisions. But at night it changes. It becomes a grid of secrets. It is a grid of black squares. I sit in the dark. I look at the windows. I wait for a word. I wait for my pen to move. Room 201 is dark. Room 504 is dark. Room 912 is dark. Everyone is gone. Everyone is safe. They are in the ocean of sleep. They are dreaming of tomorrow. They are dreaming of their families. They are dreaming of success. They are connected to the sun. But I am not. I used to feel a pain. It was a sharp pain. It was a cold pain. It lived in my chest. I looked at the dark windows. I felt like the last human. I felt like I was on a dead planet. I was shouting into a void. The void said nothing back. I was a radio playing music. But no one was listening. I was drowning. I was drowning in my own loneliness. But then everything changed. 3 months ago, a miracle happened. I found my anchor. I found my lighthouse. It is on the 7th floor. It is the second window from the left. Every night for 90 days it happens. The clock says 2:45 a.m. Suddenly a light turns on. It is not a modern light. It is not a blue light. It is not a flickering light. It is not like a television. It is not harsh. It is a warm glow. It is a soft glow. It is golden yellow. It is the color of honey. It is the color of an old photograph. It is the color of a candle. The light is shy. It stays behind a curtain. The curtain is made of white lace. The first time I saw it, I was sad. I had a dark thought. I wanted to throw my pen. I wanted to give up. I wanted to quit my life. But then the yellow glow appeared. It hit the glass of my window. It felt like a soft hand. I stopped moving. I put down my pen. I leaned my forehead on the glass. The glass was freezing. I watched that light for 2 hours. It was steady. It did not move. It did not fade. In that moment the air changed. I felt a shock. It was an electric shock. It was in my soul. I am not the only one, I whispered. Someone else is awake. Someone else is fighting the dark. I did not know their name. I did not know their age. I did not know their story. But they became my partner. They became my witness. Now my night has a rhythm. It is a beautiful rhythm. It is a sacred rhythm. I do not fear the clock anymore. I wait for 2:45 a.m. I am like a traveler in the desert. I am waiting for the first star. The yellow light appears. I feel peace. It is a deep peace. It is like a permission to exist. I imagine the person who is behind the lace curtain. Maybe it is an old professor. Maybe he is writing about stars. Maybe it is a young artist. Maybe she is painting a masterpiece. Maybe it is a mother. Maybe she is watching a child. Or maybe it is someone like me. Someone who hates the daylight. Someone who finds the sun too loud. Someone who feels the world is judgmental. Someone who only feels safe in the quiet. I began to write again. I wrote my best work. I worked under the guard of that light. Sometimes the sadness returns. The shadow is heavy. But then I look across the street. I see the light. The light is still on, I say. Keep going, David. You are not alone. I call it my deep-sea lighthouse. The street is a river. It is a black river. It is a freezing river. The wind is the tide. The tide tries to pull me away. But the yellow glow is there. I am not drowning. We are two anchors. We hold the world together. We watch while others sleep. We are the keepers of the fire. We are the watchers of 3:00 a.m. I felt a responsibility. It was a strange feeling. I must be at my desk first. I must wait for their light. I do not turn off my lamp. I wait for the sunrise. I wait for their window to go dark. I want them to see my shadow. I want them to know. I am watching over you, I think. I know you are watching the world. People ask me questions. David, why don't you see a doctor? David, why don't you take a pill? David, you need to sleep. They do not understand. They do not know the difference. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a hunger. It is a feeling of missing. It is a fear. The fear that you are invisible. The fear that no one cares. But solitude is a choice. Solitude is a sacred space. In solitude you hear your soul. You hear the whispers. Because of the seventh window, I am not lonely. I have solitude. I am alone in my room, yes. But I am connected. I am connected to a soul. There is a thread of light between us. Our contract is not on paper. It is in the light. It is in the shadow. We do not need to speak. We do not need to meet. The connection is pure. It is invisible. It is a friendship of the spirit. For 3 months this was my life. This light was my religion. It was my only constant. The world was always changing. But the light was always there. The autumn ended. The winter began. It was a bitter winter. It was a sharp winter. The nights became longer. The wind became an animal. It was a screaming animal. It rattled my windows. The snow began to fall. It covered the city. The blanket was thick. The blanket was white. The blanket was silent. But the seventh window was my truth. It was my golden truth. Until the night when the world went cold. It was a Tuesday night. It was December 14th. The temperature was very low. It was 15 degrees below zero. The windows were covered in frost. The frost looked like silver ferns. The air was freezing. I could see my own breath. It was a small white cloud. I sat at my desk. It was 2:30 a.m. My fingers were frozen. My heart was waiting. I had my pen ready. I had my notebook open. I looked at my watch. It is a silver watch. 2:45 a.m. I looked at the 7th floor. I looked at Willow Court. The window was black. I waited. I stayed very still. I thought. They are late. Maybe they are making tea. 3:00 a.m. The window was still a dark hole. The hole was in the gray wall. 3:15 a.m. Still nothing. Nothing at all. For 90 days the light was there. But tonight the grid was dead. The silence changed. It was no longer velvet. It was lead. It was heavy. It was suffocating. The air felt thin. My desk felt small. I felt panic. It was a cold panic. It was in my throat. It was worse than insomnia. Why is the light off? Are they sick? Did they move away? Did they leave in the middle of the night? Did they give up? I realized the truth. My life was fragile. My happiness was a habit. It was the habit of a stranger. I had never met this person. But without that light, I was a ghost. I was a ghost in a dark room. I stood up fast. My chair hit the floor. Clatter. My breath was short. My breath was sharp. Hi. Hi. I looked at the dark building. It looked like a tombstone. It was a giant tombstone. I could not sit here. I could not sit in the dark. I could not let the lighthouse die. I grabbed my coat. It was a heavy wool coat. I grabbed my boots. I ran to the door. I did not look back. I did not look at my stories. I was going to cross the river. I was going to find the light. The darkness wanted to swallow me. But I was ready to fight. I pulled the heavy door. The door was made of wood. It was thick. It was old. I stepped outside. The cold hit me. It hit me like a wall. It was a wall of steel. It was a wall of ice. The air was not a friend. The air was an enemy. It tried to steal my breath. It tried to freeze my blood. The thermometer said degrees. The city was a tomb. It was a blue tomb. There were no cars. There were no buses. There were no people. There were no stray cats. Everything was frozen. Everything was in hibernation. The streetlights were buzzing. Buzz. Buzz. Snap. The light was white. It looked like frozen milk. It lay on the black asphalt. I took a step. The snow was under my boots. It was hard snow. It made a sharp sound. Crunch. 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 It was the only sound. It was the sound of the universe. I felt doubt. It was a wave of doubt. It was cold and heavy. "What are you doing, David?" I whispered to the mist. The mist was my own breath. "You are running in a storm. You are looking for a stranger. You are acting like a madman." I looked up. I looked at the 7th floor. I looked at Willow Court. The window was black. The darkness was a scream. It was a silent scream. It was a cry for help. It looked like an empty eye. It was a socket in the stone. My heart was a hammer. It pounded against my ribs. Thump. 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 I did not care about the cold. I did not care about the danger. I had to know. I had to find the light. The street was narrow. In the daytime it was busy. There were coffee shops. There were grocery bags. There were children laughing. But tonight it was different. It was a black river. It was a vast river. It separated the living. It separated the dead. The wind began to howl. It moved between the buildings. Woo-wash. The wind carried ice. The ice was like needles. They were silver needles. They stung my eyes. They bit my skin. I began to run. My chest was burning. My lungs were on fire. I was swallowing glass. I was swallowing broken glass. I reached the entrance. I reached Willow Court. The glass door was thick. It was covered in grime. It was gray grime. I pushed the door. It did not move. It was locked. It was tight. I looked at the intercom. The buttons were silver. The names were fading. The ink was gone. Time had erased the people. I felt panic. It was a hot panic. It was a surge of fire. I could not stand here. I would freeze to death. Suddenly I heard a sound. It was inside the lobby. Click-clack. Click-clack. It was a slow sound. It was a tired sound. A man appeared. He wore a heavy uniform. He was a security guard. He looked bored. He looked exhausted. I hit the glass. I hit it with my fist. Thud. 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 The guard stopped. He looked at me. His eyes were narrow. His eyes were suspicious. I pointed up. I pointed to the 7th floor. I pointed to my heart. I showed him my face. My face was desperate. Maybe he saw the fear. Maybe he was too tired to talk. He pressed a button. The door opened. It made a heavy sigh. Creak. The lobby was worse than the cold. It smelled of old things. It smelled of wet carpet. It smelled of boiled cabbage. It smelled of decay. It was the slow decay of time. The ceiling was high. The paint was yellow. It was yellowed by smoke. Old cigarette smoke. I rushed to the elevator. I pressed the button. I used my frozen thumb. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. I pressed it harder. Then I saw the sign. It was a handwritten sign. It was taped to the metal. Out of order. Use the stairs. I leaned my head. I leaned it on the cold metal. I closed my eyes. 7 floors. 84 years of stairs. My legs were heavy. My heart was tired. But the silence was calling. The 7th window was calling. It was louder than exhaustion. I turned to the exit. I turned to the emergency door. The door was heavy iron. It opened with a groan. It was a metallic groan. Inside it was a tunnel. It was a vertical tunnel. It was full of shadows. The air was still. It tasted of concrete. It tasted of dust. I began to climb. Floor 1. I heard a dog. It was barking. It was behind a thick door. Woof. Woof. Floor 2. I smelled bleach. I smelled strong soap. Someone was cleaning their shame. Floor 3. My legs began to ache. My knees were clicking. My breath was a rag. It was a ragged gasp. Hi. Hi. Floor 4. I passed a door. A television was playing. It was a shopping channel. The voice was loud. The voice was fake. It talked to an empty room. No one was listening. Floor 5. I was high now. I was level with my home. I found a window. It was a small, round window. It was in the stairwell. I looked across the street. I saw my own desk. I saw my own lamp. It was a tiny star. It was in a dark ocean. It looked so safe. It looked so far away. Floor 6. My heart was a drum. It was beating too fast. It would explode. It would break my skin. My vision was blurry. The shadows were ghosts. They reached for my boots. Just one more, I said. I whispered to the stairs. Just one more truth. Finally, I reached the door. The door had a number. The number was 7. I pushed it open. I stepped into the hallway. The hallway was dim. The 7th floor was quiet. It was the quietest place. The carpet was red. It was a thin carpet. It swallowed my steps. The wallpaper was peeling. It looked like dry skin. I walked past room 701. The silence was heavy. Then I saw it. Room 702. The door was dark. It was polished mahogany. The brass was shining. The number was 702. It was a small light. I stood there. I stood for a long minute. My hand was raised. I was ready to knock. But I was frozen. I was frozen by fear. What if they are dead? What if I find a tragedy? What if I am a fool? I looked down. I looked at the gap. The gap under the door. There was no light. There was only black. It was black like the sea. It was the bottom of the sea. I took a breath. The sweat was on my head. The sweat was freezing. Knock. 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 The sound was loud. It was incredibly loud. It was a gunshot. It echoed in the hall. I waited. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Hello, I called out. My voice was thin. My voice was strange. Is anyone there? My name is David. I live across the street. Silence. More silence. I turned to walk away. I felt shame. I felt like a fool. I'm a crazy person, I said. But then I heard it. It was a soft sound. It was a shuffling sound. SHH. 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 Like old slippers. They were on a wooden floor. Then a lock turned. It was a metal lock. Click. Clack. Thunk. The door opened. It opened just an inch. The chain was there. It held the door tight. I saw an eye. It was a single eye. It was a very old eye. It had 1,000 wrinkles. It was a watery eye. It was a gray eye. It looked like a fatting moon. The boy, a voice said. It was a whisper. The boy from the window. My heart stopped. My heart missed a beat. You know me? I asked the eye. The old man did not answer. He unhooked the chain. The door opened wide. The room was small. The room was full of shadows. The air was lavender. The air was old paper. The air was medicine. It was a metallic smell. I saw him then. He was a small man. He sat in a chair. It was a wheelchair. It was old-fashioned. He had a blanket. It was a wool blanket. It was over his legs. His skin was pale. It was like the lace curtains. He looked like paper. He was a bird made of paper. This was the owner. This was the keeper. I am sorry, I said. I stepped inside. I am sorry to bother you. But your light. It did not turn on. It was 2:45. I waited for the glow. I worried about you. I didn't know what to do. The old man looked at me. He looked for a long time. Then he pointed. He pointed to a table. It was a wooden table. There was a lamp. The lamp had a silk shade. The shade was yellow. It was the color of honey. The plug was on the floor. It was away from the wall. My hands, the man said. He whispered the words. He held up his fingers. They were twisted. They were thin. They were winter branches. They are weak tonight, David. I tried to reach the plug. I fell from my chair. I have been in the dark. I have been here for an hour. I was waiting. I looked at him. I felt a tear. It was a hot tear. It was on my cheek. You were waiting for me. I asked the question. The old man smiled. It was the warmest thing. It was the only light. I was not just waiting for the door. I was waiting for you to see. I was waiting for you to see the dark. Because you were watching, I knew I was still here. I knew I was still alive. I walked to the table. I picked up the plug. I pushed it into the wall. Click. The light came back. It was beautiful. It was the golden yellow glow. It hit the walls. It hit the old books. It hit the man's face. He looked young for a second. I looked out the window. I looked across the street. I saw my apartment. I saw my desk. I saw my lonely lamp. My room was a box. It was a fragile box of light. It was in a giant world. It was in a dark world. My name is Mr. Abraham, he said. He spoke softly. I have lived here for 20 years. My wife is gone. My children are far away. I am a man of shadows. But 3 months ago I saw you. He pointed a thin finger. He pointed at my window. I saw a young man. He looked like a ghost. He was at that desk at 3:00 a.m. He was holding his head. His hands were in his hair. He looked at the dark windows. He looked at the dark and he cried. He felt like the last human. He felt like the last soul on earth. My breath caught. My throat was tight. So you turned on the light. I whispered the truth. Mr. Abraham nodded. I don't need a lamp, David. My eyes are too old. I cannot read anymore. I turn on that light for you. I turn it on because you are watching. I want you to know the night is not a prison. I want you to see a friend. I was afraid to stay in the dark. I was afraid you would think the world was gone. I was afraid you would think the light had gone out. I sat on the floor. I sat by his wheelchair. The golden light was everywhere. The cold river was gone. The stairs were gone. The panic was gone. For 90 days I was wrong. I thought the lighthouse was saving me. But we were saving each other. We were two strangers. We were in the long hours. We were the keepers of the fire. I stood in the center of the room. The light was all around me. It was the golden yellow glow. It was warm. It was kind. It washed over my clothes. My coat was wet. My boots were cold. But I felt a change. The room felt like a sanctuary. It smelled of lavender. It smelled of old books. The books were bound in leather. I smelled chamomile tea. It was dry and sweet. There were no modern machines. No blue lights from a TV. No computers humming. Only the soft breathing. Mr. Abraham was breathing slowly. And there was the ticking. The room was full of clocks. They were old clocks. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. They made a gentle rhythm. In my room, a clock was an enemy. It was a countdown. It was a sign of failure. But here it was music. It was a heartbeat. The world had forgotten to listen. "Sit down, David," he said. His voice was a vibration. It was a soft vibration in the air. He pointed to a chair. It was a velvet armchair. The color was deep red. "The storm is angry," he said. "But the light is patient." I sat down. I felt my shoulders drop. I felt my neck relax. The tension melted away. I looked at the lamp. The shade was silk. The silk was yellow. The light was steady. The light was honest. "I thought I was watching you," I whispered. I looked at my hands. "I thought you were my lighthouse. I thought I was the lost sailor, Mr." Abraham laughed. It was a dry laugh. "We are all lost, David. Every one of us. A lighthouse needs a watcher. If no one looks, the light is lonely. It is just a tower of stone. You gave my light a purpose. You gave my night a meaning. Mr." Abraham moved his chair. The wheels made a soft sound. He went closer to the window. He moved the lace curtain. "Look out there, David. Tell me what you see." I stood up. I stood next to the old man. I looked across the street. I saw the black river. The street was a dark river. I saw my own building. It was a gray wall. I had stared at it for months. And then I saw it. On the 5th floor, there was a tiny square. It was a glowing square. It was my window. I saw my wooden desk. I saw my papers. They were unfinished stories. I saw my small lamp. From this side it looked small. It looked incredibly small. It was a fragile box. It was a box of light. It was floating. It floated in a giant universe. It was a universe of darkness. It looked like a spark. A single spark of hope. It was in a forest of shadows. "That is me," I whispered. "It looks so lonely, Mr." Abraham shook his head. He shook it slowly. "It is not lonely to me, David. I have watched that spark. I watched it for 3 months. I saw your shadow. It moved against the wall. I saw you lean forward. You wanted to write a sentence. I saw you stop. I saw you take a breath. That window was proof. It was proof the world was turning. I would say to myself, look. The young man is still fighting. I must stay awake. I must keep him company. I have no family here, David. My wife Sarah is gone. She has been gone 10 years. My children are far away. They are across the ocean. They call me on a screen. But a screen is cold. A screen has no warmth. But your window is different. Your window has a heartbeat." I looked at him. His eyes were wet. They were full of tears. They reflected the golden lamp. Our solitude was a bridge. We were 2 islands. We had finally touched. "I was a watchmaker," he said. He looked at the walls. He looked at the 100 clocks. "I did it for 50 years. I worked with tiny gears. I worked with silver springs. I used microscopic screws. People think a watch is a tool. A tool for work. A tool for eating. But a watch is a poem. It is a poem about connection. A watch needs every piece. Every tiny piece must touch. If one gear stops, the whole system dies. Human beings are the same, David. In the daytime we pretend. We pretend we are alone. We walk with heads down. We wear masks. We wear masks of success. We act like independent gears. But the night is different. In the night the masks fall. The silence is too loud. That is when we know. We know the truth. We need a witness. We need someone to know. To know we are here, to know we are breathing." He touched the yellow lamp. "This lamp is not just wire. It is not just silk. It is a handshake. It is a promise. I turn it on to say, I see you. You sit at your desk to say, I am here." I felt a wave of peace. It was deeper than sleep. I understood my failure. I knew why I couldn't write. I was writing for the sun. I was writing for the day. I wanted people to look at me. But the window taught me more. I should write for the night. I should write for the souls. The souls in fragile boxes. The boxes of light. I should tell them something. The darkness is not a prison. It is a space. It is a space for the truth. It is where we find our frequency. The night began to fade. The sky was changing. The velvet blue was gone. It was a soft gray. The storm had stopped. The wind was not screaming. The snow was still. The snow was white. The city was covered. It was a blanket of peace. Mr. Abraham's head moved. It leaned forward. His breathing was slow. It was deep and steady. He was falling asleep. The golden lamp was warm. I stood up silently. I walked to the corner. There was a bed. I found a blanket. It was a thick wool blanket. I covered his legs. I made sure he was warm. I looked at the lamp. I did not turn it off. I wanted him to feel it. I wanted it in his dreams. I walked out. I closed the door. It was a mahogany door. Tick. I walked down the stairs. 7 floors of stairs. My legs were not heavy. My lungs did not burn. I walked into the morning. The air was cold. The sun was coming. The street lights were going out. They went out one by one. I crossed the Black River. I was a new man. I was reborn in the storm. I went into my building. I climbed to the 5th floor. I entered my room. It smelled of tea and dust. But it was not a cage. It was a home. I sat at my desk. The white paper was there. It was waiting for me. But I was not afraid. I felt no pressure. I did not think of success. I looked out the window. The 7th window was glowing. It was a tiny square. It was golden in the mist. I knew the truth. An old man was resting. He was safe. I was watching over him. I picked up my pen. The metal was warm. I did not think of a plot. I did not use big words. I wrote from my heart. There is a light. It never goes out. As long as someone is brave. Brave enough to look for it. The ink flowed. It was a river of gold. I wrote for 3 hours. I wrote until the sun came. The sun hit the glass. The city woke up. The city was noisy. The city was busy. But the noise was okay. I had a secret. Everyone is a gear. Everyone is searching. Searching for another gear. The best architecture is not stone. It is light. It is the invisible threads. The threads we send in the dark. Months passed by. Winter turned into spring. The frost was gone. There was the smell of rain. The grass was growing. But my ritual stayed. Every night at 2:45 a.m. The 7th window turned on. And every night at 2:45 a.m. I turned on my lamp. We never spoke again. I never knocked on door 702. We didn't need to. Words are beautiful. But silence is holy. A shared silence is a gift. I finished my book. I named it The Keeper of the 7th Window. It was not about buildings. It was about being seen. The book was published. I took the first copy. I wrapped it in paper. It was brown paper. I did not write my name. I went to Willow Court. I saw the guard. Give this to room 702, I said. It is a gift. From the boy across the river. That night at 3:00 a.m. I looked across the street. I saw the lace curtain. It moved a little. I saw a shadow. It was the shadow of a hand. The hand was against the glass. It was a wave. It was a slow wave. I raised my hand. I waved back. The city disappeared. The millions of people were gone. There were only 2 lights. There were only 2 friends. There was the peace of the blue hour. Today I want you to remember. You think you are alone. You think your room is a cage. You think darkness is an enemy. But look across the street. Look across the ocean. There is a window. There is a person. They are watching for your light. They don't know your name. They don't know your story. But they need you. They need you to stay awake. They need your fire. They want to feel brave. Success is not a number. Success is not a title. Success is being a lighthouse. It is the courage to connect. We have the same heartbeat. Do not turn off your lamp. Do not give up on the night. The morning is coming. The light you give today. It will find its way back. We are not architects of shadows. We are keepers of the flame. And the most beautiful things in life. They are delivered with a little light and a lot of heart.